From the studios of Foxborough Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Around Foxborough. My name is Jared Craig. I'll be your host for the day. I am thrilled to introduce our town manager, Bill Keegan. Mr. Keegan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
So happy to join you. It's good to be with you, Jared.
Absolutely. So I understand that you've just announced that you are retiring soon, so I'll get to that in a few minutes. But I'm wondering if just for the purpose of our viewership and maybe some laymen out there, could you explain to me the town manager role, what it is you do? I know you've been on the show a few times, and you know, I think in my conversations with people who are new to the area, what's the difference between a town manager, a mayor? How do they interact with the Board of Selectmen? Could you just give me a quick rundown of your job, if you don't mind?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So the Town Manager Act was adopted in Foxborough back in 2002. It was, previous to that, it was an executive secretary, and following that, it was a town administrator. So the role of, say, executive secretary, town administrator is more of a role that's more of a supportive role of just working directly with the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen would have both executive as well as administrative responsibilities, and the town administrator would sort of carry those things out. The town manager form of government was adopted back in 2002 to sort of take some of that responsibility back from the selectmen and to make it a more of an administrative responsibility of the town manager. That being the case, the main difference between an executive and a mayor form of government is that the mayor is an elected individual and is someone that works directly with the city council. In many cases, there are other forms where the town administrator can work with the city council, or the town manager can work with the city or the town council rather. But those positions are not elected. The town manager is an appointed professional that is trained in administrative responsibilities and understands the role and responsibility of the town's duties and functions by virtue of experience as well as professional training.
And so, as I understand it, you serve at the pleasure, maybe that's not the correct word, of the Board of Selectmen. So
that's correct.
The townspeople, taxpayers, still have a voice. If
right.
they weren't happy with what you were doing, they could express that through the selectmen, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So if there was displeasure with the way work was being performed through our office, and or individuals had disagreed. People can always disagree with the decision that's made, but I think generally speaking, if there's a genuine displeasure of the way, the direction that the town is taking, they can always, folks can always express that concern through the selectmen, who are they are the chief executive officer in that regard, as well as the chief policymaking board for the town. So therein lies the difference in that the town manager rather actually is responsible for day-to-day operational functions such as hiring and firing and budget preparation, things of that nature. But the key policy making authority rests with the Board of Selectmen, who will then provide direction to the town manager that should be carried on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Well, thanks for entertaining that question. I know
sure.
Town politics can get a little wonky for some people. I personally enjoy it, and I think you're a pretty visible person anyway. I know I've seen you on multiple occasions. I've had the pleasure of being able to email back and forth with you and people at Town Hall. So thank you for always being open and available to the townspeople as needed. It's greatly appreciated.
Well, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that, Jared, and I think it's important that the town manager has that responsibility and is accessible to folks. And it's been my personal style, and not everybody does this, but I make myself available essentially 24/7. So people have my cell phone number; they know how to reach me, and then they can reach me on a weekend or at night if it's really requires. I certainly don't want people to call me at 3 a.m. if it's not something that can wait till the next day. But having said that, there is I think it's important that people know that the town manager is accessible to them, and that if something really requires that the attention of the town manager's office, that it gets addressed as soon as possible. I pick up the phone and call people directly, and if they call and have a concern, I think it's important to have that ability to do that, so people know that their concerns are being addressed personally. So, and to the extent that we've done that, I think we've had a fair amount of success in doing that. So I appreciate that thought.
I agree. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the town at this point too. So because you've been such a dedicated civil servant to the town, I was wondering if you can remember way back. I think I counted it was either 6 or 7 years ago that you started your tenure. What first drew you to Foxborough? What was interesting about this town to you then?
Well, it's interesting because I'm actually going to be starting my 40th year of public service coming up, and I've been a manager now for about 25 years or so of that time frame. Been an assistant manager for a few times, and I was also an HR director during the course of my career in a pretty large city in South Florida. So what I think what drew me to Foxborough was, first of all, it is closer geographically. It's closer to my home, which was in Seekonk, as opposed to where I was in Dedham working and doing that drive every day. It got to be pretty difficult, as you might expect. Doing that, and you catch onto 128 in the morning was not an easy commute. But I did it for 12 years, and then I got to the point where I said, look, I want to get closer to home. This was a job that really was interesting because it's unique in many ways. It's the only community in all of New England has an NFL stadium. It also has, it's actually a nice community, and financially it's pretty well sound and pretty well managed in that regard. So we had the ability to do things that were able to be done that some communities can't do. I think that there was also, it had a good reputation for its education, school system, and public services. But I saw it as an opportunity to sort of go and sort of change the direction a little bit, the way things were going. I saw that they'd had a kind of a difficult tenure with the previous manager, and I think it was an opportunity to sort of inject some new life into the office and to actually bring a different approach to the community, which I think has worked, I think, pretty well. And I can say that because I get those comments a lot, and it's helpful, and it's also appreciated that people say that. But it's worked really well. I think the town is functioning on all cylinders at this point in time. I think all the different departments and operations and department heads, the employees are all working in tune with each other, which was something I think wasn't entirely the case previously. I think now we sort of work as a team, and I think that really is paid off, and it's paid off to the advantage of the community itself.
Yeah, I've only lived here for about coming up on 9 years now, but it certainly seems, from my point of view, a young parent, that the town is hitting its stride, and I've always attributed that a lot to you, the volunteers in town, the selectmen, the school committee, that really make this town click, make it tick, and create this sense of community that at least was rare in previous places I've lived. One thing. Oh, go ahead if you have a comment.
No, right ahead. It's fine.
Yeah. You had said that Foxborough provided the opportunity to do some things that other communities can't do. I was wondering if you had mentioned the stadium. What else sort of makes this unique from your perspective?
It's unique. I'm sorry. It's unique in the sense that it's because we do have an extra stream of revenue that we don't typically have in other cities and towns. So that additional revenue provides us the ability to provide some enhanced services through fire and police, as well as education, and it provides us the ability to take, for instance, this past few years we were able to build a new town hall and also build do renovations to the borough school. And we did those within the levy capacity of the town without doing an override or a debt exclusion. So that we wouldn't have been able to do that without additional revenue capabilities that we have here in Foxborough. So we use that to our advantage in this case, and we're able to save the taxpayers a lot of money by doing it that way. So I do think that we still have some work to be done in other infrastructure areas. When there's been quite a bit of talk about improving sidewalks and further improvements on roads, and those are all things we're planning for. We're developing plans for those as we speak. I do think that we'll have a good plan in place for the next year, and I do think you'll start to see some improvements in those areas as well. But I think generally speaking, Foxborough is financially sound in the sense that we're AAA rated, which is the highest rating you can get from Standard and Poor's as a rating agency. That tells us that they see our finances as being very sound and well balanced. We take a lot of pride in that, and I think that that because of the fact that we have we look at things pretty fiscally conservative, even though I think some people would argue with that, but it is fiscally conservative in the sense that we don't overburden the community if we can help it. The past 3 years we've done budgets that have been under 3%, which I challenge anybody to find many communities that can do that, because generally speaking, budgets go up in the area of 4 to 5% in many cases. So we've been able to keep budgets under 3% for the past 3 years. So I think those are things that that puts us in a better position than most, and I'm quite certain that that having the advantage of the stadium, which by the way was a challenge during COVID because the stadium was closed. So essentially, I mean, even though NFL games were being held there, we weren't seeing any fans in the stands, and that that has a ripple effect, because when you have fans in the stands, you also have fans in hotel rooms, fans in restaurants, fans in local bars and things of that nature, which all contribute towards the tax base in many ways. So I think that was a big burden to us during that period of time, but now we've been able to get through that. we had set aside some revenues that we had a free cash position that was better than some, and as a result, we were able to use those funds to keep the community running, and pretty much on all cylinders for the most part during that period of time.
It certainly felt like that as a resident, that we were weathering a storm. But I know I've always tried to make it to the annual town meetings, and it's always well presented, the financial picture, I feel like, and it seems to be a source of pride among the elected officials that we are paying our OPEB agreements on time and even ahead of schedule, and that losing that source of revenue. I was thinking about this at the last town meeting back in May or June. I think it was May. We are almost back to normal. We seem to have weathered the storm, and I hope that people have given proper credit to you, the selectmen, and the elected officials who helped make that happen, because it seems like we're faring pretty well through all this.
Well, I appreciate that, Jared. And it's interesting to note that we're going to make a payment in the fall of this year at the special town meeting in the fall, which will bring us up to back on schedule for all the payments on our OPEB schedule, and that's extraordinary when you think about it, because we were almost leading the way in terms of paying that obligation down. We're probably one of the top 5 communities in the state in doing that, which in and of itself is extraordinary for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that it looks like as though right now that we'll be able to retire that obligation along with our pension obligation right about the same time. And by doing that, that actually frees up several $1 million that the town could then use to actually spend on other capital facilities, improvements to the community, and even to take and do some things that we haven't done before. So I do think that I won't see it during my tenure. Unfortunately, I'm going to be fortunately, unfortunately, I guess, that I'll be retired at that point. But at least I feel comfortable knowing that the town is in that position and actually can look forward to that position in the next 6 to 7 to 8 years. So I think it's something that I'm very proud of. I know that the financial team here is very proud of. I know the selectmen and the finance committee and the advisory committee, rather, and the school committee are all very mindful of that, and I think it's really helpful that we're in that kind of a position. And thanks to the residents of the community for supporting us in that effort.
Absolutely. And I just want to mention, in case people out there might be confused, that OPEB, as I understand it, is the pension insurance that every community is required to pay, but many, I believe they're not being forced to pay yet. We're ahead of the curve for all of that, it seems like, statewide.
That's correct. So it's the OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. So OPEB, and what that means is the health insurance portion of the obligation that goes to retirees is something that gets paid out of that, well, essentially out of that obligation. And then what will happen is that it won't become a debt against the town's finances. It will be actually paid as we go once the longstanding the outstanding obligation has been paid off, and then we'll be in a position to just pay as we go at that point, which is a significantly lower number than what the payment is obligation is now. So I do think that a lot of people haven't even begun to pay that down, which I think is going to creep up and really become a very surprising number to them at one point. But I think the earlier we started with this, the better it was for us, and that this is actually the second community that I worked in that actually was able to do that. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment, that we were able to get that application off the books. And as one of my former selectmen in Dedham said to me, he said that we now are accounting for the full cost of government here in Massachusetts, here in Foxborough, whereas a lot of people can't say that they're doing that. No, we're actually meeting all our obligations on all fronts.
Which I would assume would make us a desirable place to work if you're a town employee looking for a new town to go to. Well, come here. They've
Right.
Foxborough's paying up. You're guaranteed to get your pension if things go awry. We pay the insurance.
That's right. Well, it's actually sort of leading into the the next leadership position for the town and who that will be. I mean, I certainly don't know who that's going to be, and I don't know what direction that will take. But it's in terms of coming to a community from a manager's perspective, I would think that this would be a desirable place to want to come to for that reason alone. Because the finances are in good shape, the organization's in good shape. We have labor peace here. There's not, all the contracts have been settled. So there's no really significant challenges, at least that a manager would reach coming in, except at that point in time, when you're making a transition like that, it takes a while before you just get used to how the town operates. So I think it's a perfect time to transition, where a person would come in and actually would be able to hit the ground running, if you will, that they could actually get up to speed on what's going on in town, get to know people, establish working relationships, and able to do a lot of things that you couldn't do otherwise if you were focusing on chasing down some very significant or challenging issues that you would be facing coming into perhaps other places. So I think it's a great time to transition, but it presents a really nice opportunity for a manager to come into this community and start off in a right foot.
That's great. So we've danced around it, I think, as much as we could. But you've announced you're retiring to the town, and so I was wondering if you could share with us how you came to that decision. You seem fairly young to be retiring to me, but maybe that's just because I'm happy with the work you've been doing and don't want to see you go. But could you also give us a little retrospective about some of the projects that have come to fruition under your tutelage?
Well, I appreciate that, Jared. I'm actually I maxed out on my pension from the state actually in January of next year, so I'll be formally retiring at the end of January. But I am under contract with a separate contract to stay on until the end of June. But though I don't think I'll be here as long, it's just to help with the transition of the new administration, and so we want to make that as smooth as possible for the next person. So I've agreed to work with the town in that respect, and certainly want to do everything we can to make it a smooth transition for the next person. As far as some of the projects, well, there is literally a long list. I do this process every place I've been to, and it was actually recommended to me by a select board member at one point, who said, when you sit down sometimes and you say, what did I just do, or what have I been involved in, or what has the organization done over the past several years? It's really hard to do it unless you write it down. So what we did, and we started this process when I first got here, was to keep track of all the different things that have been done. And there's a list about 15 pages long of different accomplishments that the organization, not just Bill Keegan, but certainly, I was working with a lot of people to get these things done. But to the credit of the department heads, the different boards, the committees, all the participating members of the local government here in Foxborough were able to accomplish during the past 8 to 9 years. And I think it's it's extraordinary. And when you look at the things, I mean, we've literally brought in millions upon millions of dollars of new funds. We were able to buy new equipment. We were able to build new buildings. We were able to, restructure the government so it was much more efficient. Change the direction, create labor peace amongst the unions. Establish good working relationships with the craft organization, with Schneider Electric, two of the biggest employers in town, and to do those things took time, effort, and a willingness to try and work cooperatively with those folks and with all the different agencies and the different boards and committees throughout the town. So my hat is off to all the folks that participated in it. This is not a list. Again, this is not a Bill Keegan list. This is a town of Foxborough list that I think is really important for people to see, and I'll be happy to share that with you at some point so you can take a look at that. But it starts from anywhere from negotiating contracts to creating new committees such as the Economic Development Committee, improving the relationship with the craft group, looking at creating a downtown redevelopment plan, looking at finally getting the fire station project moving in the right direction. So that's going to be opening in the fall now with a new bar, a new restaurant and bar as well as some new housing projects that are going on around there as well. So there's a lot of different things and it really runs the entire gamut as far as strategic planning, as well as actual construction of projects, as well as organizational improvements that continue to make the organization function at a high level. So it's a pretty good list.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's probably easy for some of us to drive around and notice the buildings that have opened or been renovated, and the Lane property, and the ribbon cutting ceremonies. But some of the stuff you mentioned, like a relationship with the craft group, which sounds like it would be extremely important, as between them and Schneider, probably the two biggest businesses in town, I would assume. That's something that's not really tangible that you can touch. Do you think that with that extended contract, you'll be able to make sure that the next town manager who's replacing you in January, February, and to June timeframe will be able to pick up where you left off? Is that why you're staying on, to sort of help with that learning curve?
Well, I think that's part of the learning curve. It's also getting to know. I mean, the last thing I want to do is get in the way of a new manager and actually substitute my thinking for theirs, because I think it's really up to them to be responsible for the role. And then I think I'm certainly going to take a step back from that. But I do think it's important to have the right introductions and the right relationship established right out of the gate, so that folks know who they're dealing with. Who's the right person to talk to if certain things go awry for whatever reason. But I do think that establishing relationships is probably one of the most important functions of a town manager. Is having good working relationships with all the various players in the community, as well as the residents, along with the various committees, the different departments. Those are important because that's how things get done. And if you have bad relationships, that means things get delayed because you have to fix that situation, or something comes up that wasn't anticipated, or it takes time to rethink a strategy on how to get it done, as opposed to sitting down, with a non-stressful environment to sit down and say, okay, what do you think about this? How do you think we can address this for both sides? What's on our collective interest? Then I think that's really why we've been collectively successful as a town and as an organization, because we took that step, and now it's at a point now where if something happens, the relationship requirement that I have with all the folks that I deal with is that the understanding is that there's no surprises. We just we try, and if there's something coming up that happens, and we try to keep each other informed, keep each other in the loop. Pick up the phone and call us if there's a problem, or just have that conversation before something becomes a challenge. I'll give a good example. Was last week we were concerned in town about the traffic issues potentially from the Elton John concert. A lot of folks got together and worked behind the scenes to make sure that wasn't an issue. And guess what? It was pretty uneventful for the most part throughout town on both those nights. So that took a lot of effort behind the scenes and a lot of cooperation amongst a lot of folks to make that happen. But that's the way it should happen. It's not supposed to be something that becomes a headline story for a lot of people. It should be something that becomes something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes you learn from mistakes. Mistakes happen, but as long as you don't continuously make those same mistakes, I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And as someone who lives right near the stadium too, I appreciate all the work that goes into that on a sometimes weekly basis with back-to-back events.
Right.
So I can appreciate how difficult that must be when you've got this sort of spaghetti bowl of roads trying to figure out, where to put people and how to make it flow. Appreciate, to you and Chris Gallagher and everyone who has to make those
And to the police
decisions.
department, the police department did a tremendous job, I think, of managing that situation, taking the lead and sort of helping identify a good way to do work, to work with the craft group as well as to work with the state police and the sheriff's office and the various different agencies that go into managing that issue. It's not an easy thing to do, and I give credit to those folks who put their heads together and figured out a good strategy to make that happen, and it worked out really, really well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel like the police department's always the sort of face of it, but there's so many people too working with and around them to make that happen. So thanks for acknowledging that.
Right.
I was reflecting on the last time that we spoke, which was at the beginning of COVID. I think I met with you and a few town officials, maybe the chief of police and the town nurse as well. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about protocols that you put in place, especially with having this relationship with the craft group and how town rules that the town put in place obviously were going to affect Patriot Place as well. Correct?
Right. That's right.
How did that affect your relationship with them? And if there's a situation that arises like this in the future, are we prepared for that? Something like that again, if God forbid it were to happen?
Well, I think we're in much better position to deal with that kind of a situation in the future because we've all learned a lot during the past few years. But I think Foxborough was a little bit ahead of the curve when this happened, and sometimes I'd rather be lucky than good. And this is a case where I think the timing worked out perfectly. But we had the fire department had come to me actually about 6 months before COVID hit, to create what is known as a community paramedicine program. And we would have been, at the time, I think we were the first in the state to actually do this. But it was a case of allowing the paramedics throughout our community that work from the fire department primarily to interact with a lot of different town agencies, interact with residents, and help manage a major event like that, like a COVID response. During the time, it was difficult for the Board of Health because they have limited resources to do outreach. Though they did everything they could within their own position to try and manage it. It was difficult for them to do it unless they had boots on the ground to try and help manage those situations. So the fire department really stepped up in that situation and did a great job of sort of taking a lead role along with the Board of Health to try and manage the COVID in the community. And that was, we were able to do vaccinations, we were able to do testing, we were able to do a lot of things that other communities just simply couldn't do because they weren't set up to do that. So we took the lead in a lot of ways. Our folks, we meaning the fire department and the Board of Health, took a lead in that situation that other communities I think were pretty envious of. And they did a terrific job of managing it. I think we established early on what the situation would be in planning with the craft group about how situations would be. The NFL sort of dictated how attendance would be at games, as well as events that they were trying to do. And in fact, they had they approached us a couple of times about doing some drive-in theater type things at the stadium, which we were able to work with them on. That was something that was unique to Foxborough because we had the ability to do that. But we tried to be creative during that period of time because we knew it was hurting them as well as it was hurting us. So we tried to do everything we could to keep businesses sustained up at Patriot Place. I know they took a pretty big hit during that period of time as well. But we try to keep things moving in the right direction so that they could actually, gain some momentum and traction. You saw the drive-through light displays around the holidays. You saw the different. They had the outdoor movie showings, and they also did outdoor showings of the games. So they were able to kind of just do some things that were unique that were uniquely Foxborough, and in Gillette Stadium that would allow us to do some things that was something that will sort of stand as a new approach to how to deal with those kind of scenarios. But I do
I
think
love
that
that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Please continue. I was just going to say I love that. Uniquely Foxborough. That's
Yeah,
kind of what this town loves.
it was uniquely Foxborough, and it was something that folks really did appreciate. I do think that it's something that I hope that the next generation of managers, the manager that will be here, will never have to experience that, because it was difficult. We were fortunate that during that period of time, and this is the credit to the kind of folks that we have throughout Foxborough in the town and the town employees, that we were really shut down for only about three or 4 weeks at the most during COVID, where there were some towns that were closed for a year and a half. In other words, you couldn't go into the town hall, you couldn't do business there, you had to do everything remotely. I just learned that there were certain towns that were just coming back online as of the first of this year, whereas we'd been open. I think we shut down for like May and June and reopened in July of 2020. So, and that's to the credit of the employees here. It also helped and was tremendously helpful because of the way this town hall is designed, that we were able to create enough space and to safely create an environment that was safe for our employees as well as for the public. And I think that was really key for why we were able to stay open for most of it. But to the credit of the employees, they willingly came in and did the work. And whereas some communities struggled to really keep people from staying at home to do the work from there. So I think we were very, very fortunate during that period of time to have the quality of employees that we have here to do the work the way they did it. I think the same thing holds true in the Council on Aging. Council on Aging was one of the few councils on aging anywhere in the state that was opening and still open holding programs. I think at the time, I think the library was one of the few libraries that was open. So we were able to set a standard that you say, hey, look, we're going to continue to provide services to the public the way we should, and even during difficult times when it was not the easiest thing to do.
I also want to acknowledge you had a weekly show on Foxborough Cable Access where you would sort of give a rundown of the pandemic and update people on that. And I always thought it projected a nice sense of calm in the midst of so much unknown, that, it was nice to, turn off the national CNN news outlets and hear what's happening in town. And it's not so bad right here. We're doing okay.
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're doing okay.
Thanks for doing that.
It was. I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. It was. I used to do those actually from home and from weekends and from here, because I thought it was very important to keep the folks informed about where we were going, how things were happening, and how they were unfolding. And quite honestly, I think what you just described is that there was a sense of calmness in the community because we were able to stay connected and continue to communicate throughout a difficult time.
Absolutely. We're just about out of time. I'd love to ask you one question. I think it's kind of a fun one, but after your 6 or 7 years here and looking back on it, if the taxpayers gave you a blank check, is there one project, one thing that you'd like to see done with that money? With no limit.
Well, there's actually a few things, and I one of them, and both are controversial to a degree, but I also think they're necessary. And one of the things is to create more affordable housing in the community. I think that I worry as a leader that we're sort of turning our eye to that in a way that's turning a blind eye to say, it's going to go away, but that issue is going to affect every generation in this community. And whether young people that can't afford to live here because their kids won't be able to live here, the older generation won't be able to afford to live here. We have to come to the realization that's a challenge that we have to face. So I think to the extent that we could do more with that, I think we should, and because I think it's for the right reasons, not to be, I know everything you do impacts somebody, but by the same token, that's something that really needs to be thought of seriously, because I know that Paige Duncan, as the town planning director and land use director, has has worked tirelessly on that issue, and we've had some successes, working with the housing authority, and also a couple projects that are being done now. But I do think that that's really important to have that. That's one issue that we really need to do more with. The other is to further develop along Route One, and I think that the thing that's missing there is the sewer along Route One needs to get done at some point. And I think if we're able to do that, we can do more with developing Route One in a way that's really truly beneficial to not only to Foxborough but for the entire region. That's one of the last major undeveloped areas that's zoned properly for that kind of use up on Route One. And I think that we want to we're going to spend more time and effort to try and focus on that. But I do think that that's something for the next person to really focus on when they get into office is to continue that momentum of trying to develop that strategic plan for developing along Route One.
Excellent. Well, that sums it up. I know that housing is controversial, and I know people feel very strongly one way or the other. And I was on a committee with Paige Duncan and Leah Gibson, and we met monthly to try to wrap our heads around it. And it's such a big problem. So thanks for acknowledging that too. I think that's important for people to hear.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, any final remarks? Go ahead.
I was going to say that I do think that that Paige, Leah, all the people who participated in that process have been, really offering a tremendous amount of value to the community by doing that. And we know that not everything's going to fly. We recognize that, but I think to say that we can adjust and make some changes that make sense it's going to hurt folks down the road. And I think even the folks that are here now and doing well, and I'm happy they are. But I think they should recognize that next generation is going to have to move in at some point. And we recognize that not everybody can afford to do that. But, at some point it's going to affect their economy. It's going to affect our ability to do work. And we need to have places where school teachers can live, where police and fire and DPW workers can live, so that we can provide those basic services. And if we can't find affordable places for them to live, it's going to be a real challenge to continue to provide those services.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks so much. And that is all of our time for today. Mr. Keegan, I so appreciate you taking time out of your schedule for us, and look forward to seeing you around for the next 6 months or so. And then please don't be a stranger around Foxborough.
No, I truly appreciate that. I won't be, and I plan on staying connected here as much as I can. I hope to be able to get over to the station to do a couple more shows before I leave. I know I've been a little bit negligent in my responsibility of doing a local show as of late, but we've had a lot to focus on, and certainly I appreciate you guys doing shows like this so we can stay connected and keep people informed as much as possible.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you, and the town appreciates all you've done for us for the past few years. And so I'm going to wrap it up now. And I'm your host, Jared Craig. Thanks for joining us on Around Foxborough with Town Manager Bill Keegan, and we'll hope to see you next week. Have a good one.